The Gravemind Industries factory floor buzzed with a strange tension, one part frustration, one part panic. At the center of the chaos stood the company's prized possession, the Atlas Mark 9000, a $6 million automated packaging system meant to revolutionize production. But for 2 weeks, it hadn't moved an inch. Technicians had worked around the clock. Top-tier engineers had flown in. Even software consultants from overseas had taken a crack. But every time the start button was pressed, the system would whir, blink, and then power down like a tired old man who'd given up. The losses were mounting fast, and deadlines were now nightmares. At 9:45 a.m., Leonard Quinn, the company's CEO, arrived in a sleek black car. He didn't like wasting time or money, and right now, the machine was doing both. Dressed in an immaculate navy suit, Leonard stormed in, scanning the crowd with an expression carved from granite. "No updates," he barked. Silence answered him, and then he saw him. Near the janitor's closet, leaning against a mop bucket, stood a teenage boy. Mud-caked boots. Rolled-up flannel sleeves. A tired look in his eyes that didn't quite match his age. Leonard sneered. "Well, if none of you can fix it," he said loud enough for the cameras and social media team to hear, "maybe we should let the farmer's kid take a crack at it." A few people laughed. The boy didn't. He just looked up, calm, steady, and took one step forward. The laughter died down. No one knew the boy's name yet. No one knew who his father was, but they were about to find out. A hush fell over the factory floor as the boy stepped toward the Atlas Mark 9000. His name was Eli Maddox, though no one here bothered to ask. To them, he was just the farmer's son, the kid who cleaned up after hours with his dad's old wrench kit strapped to his belt. He didn't speak as he approached the machine. He didn't need to. CEO Leonard Quinn raised an eyebrow, amused. "You know what that machine's worth, son?" Eli nodded, brushing a bit of grease off a side panel. "More than the last car you totaled during a merger, sir." The room froze. One of the interns gasped. Leonard's smirk faltered. With surprising confidence, Eli dropped to one knee and removed the side casing. His hands moved fast, methodical, precise. He didn't have a tablet, a blueprint, or a schematic. Just instincts, and scars on his fingers that spoke of long days spent repairing broken tractors, not billion-dollar robots. "Careful with those circuits," one engineer muttered. Eli didn't look up. "That's not your problem. The issue's in the coolant line. It's over-pressurized and feeding bad data to the sensor array. Machine thinks it's overheating." Half the engineers blinked. One leaned over and whispered, "He's not wrong." Leonard crossed his arms. "And how do you know that?" Eli looked up at him, calm and direct. "Because machines panic when they lose trust in their own numbers. Just like people." He tightened a valve, adjusted a few wires, and stood back. "Try it now." A technician pressed the button, where, click, the machine roared to life, smooth, seamless, perfect. Gasps. Applause. Phones out. Tweets flying. Leonard stared, stunned that he still didn't know who the boy's father was, but he was about to find out, and regret ever mocking him. Leonard Quinn stood in stunned silence, his ego bruised under the weight of disbelief. Around him, the factory buzzed with renewed energy, workers murmuring, engineers nodding in awe, even a few high-ranking managers glancing nervously at the boy. Eli Maddox had just done in 5 minutes what the company's best couldn't manage in 2 days. "Who is this kid?" Leonard finally muttered. No one answered. The boy had already returned to the shadow of the loading dock, wiping his hands with a rag like nothing had happened. But something had changed, everyone could feel it. It wasn't just the machine that had been fixed. Eli had reset the room. The balance. The pride. Leonard approached him slowly, folding his arms. "You didn't just guess. That was expertise. Who taught you?" Eli met his gaze, unshaken. "I didn't guess. I listened. Machines talk, if you know how to hear them." Leonard frowned. "And your father?" Eli's lips twitched with a trace of a smirk. You mean the man you called a dirt pusher with oil-stained dreams? Yeah. He taught me. The line hit like a punch to the gut. Whispers swept across the floor. Some employees who had chuckled at the farmer earlier now shifted uncomfortably, their guilt creeping in. Leonard cleared his throat. What's his name? Eli wiped the last bit of grease from his palms. Harold Maddox. The color drained from Leonard's face. Harold Maddox. The man he once tried to buy out, belittle, and bury in litigation. A genius inventor who walked away from the corporate world when Leonard stole his patent, only to return to the earth and raise his son in silence. Now, that past had returned, with a wrench and a quiet fire, and Leonard had just handed him the floor. The factory felt colder now. The name Harold Maddox didn't just echo, it rippled. Like thunder after a lightning strike. For the veterans on the floor, it was a name they hadn't dared speak in years. For the younger ones, it was a mystery, a puzzle they suddenly needed to solve. Leonard Quinn took a step back. That you're Harold Maddox's boy? He asked again, his voice a mix of disbelief and fear. Eli nodded slowly. And you're the man who tried to erase him? Silenced. A shift manager whispered to a colleague, I thought Maddox disappeared after that patent case. He didn't disappear, Eli interrupted without raising his voice. He went back to building, just not for you. That line stung. And Leonard knew it. The arrogance he'd carried, the belief that Harold would fade into obscurity, was now a ghost gripping his collar. Worse, Harold hadn't come back. His son had, and the son had learned everything. Leonard tried to compose himself. You've clearly got skill. Why come here now? Eli tilted his head. Why not? This machine, needed fixing. The jab hit home, drawing a few quiet chuckles from the braver employees. For once, the room was no longer scared of Leonard. They were curious about Eli. Word spread like wildfire. Phones buzzed. Someone Googled Harold Maddox's old interviews, his visionary ideas, his broken partnership with Quinn Technologies, his quiet disappearance. One engineer stepped forward. Eli, how'd you know the compressor wasn't the issue? Same way my father did, Eli replied. I trusted my hands. And I paid attention to what everyone else ignored. And just like that, the factory floor, once a place of hierarchy and fear, was now a stage, and Eli Maddox had just taken center. Leonard retreated to his office, slamming the glass door shut behind him. But glass doesn't block whispers, it only amplifies isolation. Outside, the energy had shifted. Workers huddled in quiet groups, trading stories about Harold Maddox and wondering what else Eli knew. Inside, Leonard poured himself a glass of water, his hands trembling. He opened a locked drawer and pulled out a dusty folder, blueprints, schematics, and notes written in Harold's unmistakable script, designs they once co-created, but Harold's notes had always been ahead of their time, too bold, too disruptive. Leonard had buried those blueprints years ago when he realized investors feared innovation more than they embraced it. He'd chosen safety. Harold had chosen integrity, and now Harold's son was here. Not with lawyers. Not with threats, with results. Back on the floor, Eli walked among the machines, checking bolts, recalibrating sensors. He wasn't showing off, he was teaching. Listen to the rhythm, he told a technician. Machines have moods. You don't fix them, you understand them. One of the senior engineers, Mr. Clark, followed closely. I worked with your father, he said. He was the best we had. Eli smiled faintly. He always spoke highly of you. Said you were the only one who cared more about the work than the credit. Clark looked away, guilt washing over his features. We didn't stand up for him when Leonard pushed him out. You don't have to apologize, Eli replied. But you do have to help me finish what he started. By the time Leonard emerged again, a quiet order had settled over the floor, but it wasn't fear. It was focus. Eli had captured them not with a name, but with something far more dangerous, inspiration, and Leonard knew, this wasn't just about fixing a machine anymore. It was about rebuilding a legacy. By morning, word had spread, every floor, every department, every dusty corner of the plant buzzed with one name, Eli Maddox. He didn't wear a badge. He didn't sit in meetings. But the machine that hadn't worked for months was now humming like it had second life, and everyone knew who breathed it back to life. Eli arrived early again, toolbox in hand. He didn't march in like a savior. He walked like a worker, like someone who belonged, even though technically, he didn't. Leonard watched from the upper balcony. He clenched the railing, his jaw locked. His executive team stood beside him, nervously shifting. "We can't ignore this," said one of them, "he doesn't even work here." Leonard barked, another executive hesitated. "And yet, he did in 48 hours what our team couldn't in 4 months. Below them, Eli was showing 2 young interns how to recalibrate the machine for precision cutting. "My dad taught me that pressure isn't just force, it's trust," he said. "Too much, and you break it. Too little, and nothing moves." His words hit deeper than just the metal. Marcy, the plant supervisor, approached Leonard cautiously. "Sir, we need to talk about Eli." Leonard didn't respond. Marcy continued, "He's not just Harold's son. He's Harold's legacy. And he's doing more for morale than any memo you've ever sent." That stung. But worse, he knew it was true. Back on the floor, Eli stood before the finished machine. He wiped his brow and stared at it like it was an old friend finally awake. Then he turned, nodded to Marcy, and said quietly, "Tell Leonard it's done, but we're not finished." Leonard realized something chilling. This wasn't a favor. This was a reckoning. The news of Eli Maddox's success traveled beyond the factory walls, stirring curiosity and skepticism alike. Industry insiders whispered about the farmer's son who fixed the unfixable, while social media buzzed with clips of the machine roaring back to life under his skilled hands. Inside the company, the atmosphere shifted. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting to discuss the growing influence of Eli. Leonard Graves sat rigidly at the head of the table, his face a mask of control, but inside, doubt gnawed at him. "We're losing control," one board member warned. "If we don't act, this young man will become the symbol of everything we failed to achieve." Leonard's voice cut through the tension. "Eli is an outsider. He's a liability, not an asset." But Marcy, now more confident in her role, stood up. "With all due respect, Leonard, Eli is the asset we desperately need. He's bringing innovation, efficiency, and hope. We can't afford to push him away." The boardroom erupted in debate, but the decision was clear. Eli would be given a trial period to lead a new task force aimed at overhauling the plant's failing systems. Eli accepted the challenge with quiet determination. He knew this was more than a job, it was a chance to prove that hard work and knowledge could come from anywhere, even a farm in the middle of nowhere. That evening, Eli returned to the farm where his father, Harold Maddox, waited with a proud but cautious smile. "Your grandfather would have been proud," Harold said, clapping his son on the shoulder. Eli nodded. "I'm just getting started." As the sun set over the fields, Eli prepared for the battle ahead, one that would test his skills, his resolve, and his ability to change not just machines, but minds. As Eli stepped into his new role leading the Innovation Task Force, the reality of corporate politics hit hard. Not everyone was ready to accept a farmer's son as their leader. Whispers followed him through the factory halls: skepticism, jealousy, even outright hostility. One morning, during a crucial meeting, a senior engineer named Marcus challenged Eli openly. "You might have fixed one machine, but running this entire operation requires years of experience, not just luck or farm skills." Eli met Marcus's gaze calmly. "Experience matters, yes. But so does fresh perspective and hands-on knowledge. I'm here to learn from all of you and share what I know." His words didn't silence Marcus, but they made others in the room reconsider their stance. Clara Donnelly, the senior engineer who had supported Eli from the start, spoke up. "Marcus, I think Eli's practical approach has already saved us time and money. Let's give him a chance." Still, the resistance was real. Meetings were tense, decisions delayed, and some workers openly resisted new protocols Eli suggested. Outside the factory, the media spotlight intensified. Headlines celebrated Eli as a symbol of change, but also painted him as an outsider disrupting the status quo. Leonard Graves saw the growing media narrative as a threat to his legacy. Behind closed doors, Leonard plotted to undermine Eli's progress, feeding doubts to the board and spreading rumors about his background that he questioned Eli's qualifications, his loyalty, and even his motives. But Eli's father, Harold, reminded him, "They can't stop you unless you stop believing in yourself." Fueled by his father's words and the support of a few key allies like Clara and Marcy, Eli pushed forward. He began organizing workshops, inviting factory workers to share their insights and concerns. Slowly, the walls of resistance started to crumble. Change was never easy, but Eli's steady resolve was turning skeptics into believers. The factory was starting to feel alive again, not just with machines, but with hope. The breakthrough came unexpectedly one rainy afternoon. The factory was humming with activity, and Eli was reviewing data from the latest machine tests when an alert popped up on his tablet. A recurring fault pattern in one of the newer models was causing costly downtime, but no one had been able to trace the root cause. Eli grabbed his toolbox and headed straight to the production floor. His boots splashed through puddles left by the leaking roof, but his focus was sharp. As he approached the machine, he noticed subtle signs: worn wires, misaligned sensors, and a faint burning smell that others had missed. Using his hands-on experience from years on the farm, Eli began to dismantle the faulty unit. He found a tiny, overlooked flaw, a poorly insulated wire that sparked under pressure, triggering automatic shutdowns. With a few careful adjustments and a replaced connector, Eli restarted the machine. This time, it ran flawlessly through several cycles without a hitch. The room filled with applause from workers and engineers alike. News of Eli's success spread quickly through the company. Even some of the most vocal critics began to acknowledge his unique skill set, a blend of practical know-how and technical insight. Leonard Graves, watching the news from his office, felt the walls closing in. His attempts to discredit Eli were losing ground. The board members, impressed by Eli's results, started calling for strategic changes to embrace innovation. Eli's father, Harold, called that evening. "Son, you're not just fixing machines, you're fixing the future for all of us." Eli smiled, knowing the journey wasn't over yet. But for the first time, he felt the tides turning in his favor. The factory was no longer a place of doubt, it was becoming a beacon of possibility. The atmosphere in the factory had transformed. What once was a place filled with skepticism and hidden judgments had become a hub of innovation and respect. Eli's success wasn't just about fixing a broken machine, it was about breaking down barriers that had held back talent for years. The board had made their decision. Leonard Graves, the CEO who had doubted and mocked Eli, was stepping down. A new leadership team was being assembled, one that valued grit, expertise, and fresh perspectives. Eli was offered a leading role on the innovation team, tasked with redesigning the factory's entire machinery line. His practical knowledge, combined with his newfound confidence, made him the perfect fit. The boy who had once stood quietly near the janitor's closet was now shaping the future of the company. At home, Harold watched proudly as his son prepared for the new challenge. "You showed them that greatness doesn't come from titles or suits, but from hard work and heart." Eli nodded, feeling the weight of that truth settle deep within him. He thought about every late night on the farm, every lesson learned through sweat and persistence, but more than that, he thought about everyone who had ever been overlooked, waiting for a chance to prove themselves. This was no longer just Eli's story. It was a symbol for all underdogs daring to dream beyond their circumstances. As he stood on the factory floor one last time, Eli knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but also with limitless possibility. The muddy boots, the worn flannel, the quiet determination that was the legacy he carried forward, and with every machine he fixed, every innovation he sparked, Eli was not just building a company, he was building hope. The future was bright, and it was only just beginning. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who needs a little motivation today. Comment below where you're watching from and what part of Eli's journey moved you the most. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring story that can change your perspective. Remember, no matter where you come from, greatness starts with believing in yourself.